Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Street Trash from 1987. I had gone on to be aware of also that this movie has a remake to it, and some people may go on and like the remake more, or the original, and regardless, I'm to just share its existence. I had also heard that to a number of people that the remake is to be a sequel to a number of people, so maybe that is to be all the more reason for me to cover the original instead of the extra crispy. So, I am to go on and say that Street Trash. Street Trash within this film has a number of interesting visuals, but then also is to have some, I think, non coherent dialogue within the film. We would go on to have me at certain points state that this movie also has a bit of skin when it comes into the film beyond its skin melting throughout the film, which is to be the whole crux of the film about this alcoholic concoction that is to have aged 60 years, and eventually, when people are to consume it, they are to eventually melt away because of it. We would also go on and have skin to be placed within this film via certain ways of putting this movie together. We would go on to have Fred, who's to be trying to evade a number of people in the very beginning of this film, and come to find his way into this apartment complex that seemingly is of a blaze or on fire. And Fred stumbles upon this couple who are in the midst of laying on top of one another. And Fred lets them know that the building is on fire, and they, of course, evade or evacuate this building in reckless abandonment without actual clothes on. We then go on, and in the later half of the movie, have a character known as Bronson who is fighting with another hobo. At a certain point, there seems to be some yellowy liquid that comes flying at him. He is to try and figure out where the source of this is coming and rip that off of a man. And we would come to find that there is to be some bizarre-ish amount of keep away going on within a person's private part, manhood, wing, what have you. And that is to be such of a bizarre and an absurdity of this film. But regardless, it's a thing that I can go on and talk about. We would also later on have Fred, who's to be stumbling his way through town, and eventually meet up with a woman who it seems is to go on and be assuming that Fred is going to be her lover of sorts, and Fred is to not tell her any difference otherwise. Fred is to go on and realize that this girl is willing to throw herself at him, so he is to go on and take said girl, drag her back to his junkyard, and have his time with her. Then it seems that there are to be people off in the distance through the crack holes of the place where Fred is going on and having this bit of intimacy with her, kind of pull her away and drag her off, and then we'll find later on her body dead. So really, that is to be, for the most point, what kind of plays out within this film. But let me go on and get to some other interesting aspects of this movie. We have to point a character named Bert. Bert goes on and eventually is to find a couple of bucks of money. So he makes his way into this store to eventually not only try to spend said money, but is also giving a $5 or a five finger discount where he is to be thrusting a number of items just down his trousers and eventually is to be confronted by this and hilarity ensues. We would go on to also, within this film, be getting a character known as Bill. Bill is to seemingly be the cop in this film, and he is to be rather big and beefy as this man is to be delivering uh, this aggression within this film. So, Bill at a certain point goes on and is to eventually find random said businessman that is to be seemingly melting away. And Bill goes on to himself to try and figure out what's going on with this man. But then again, also, he gets so distracted by some woman and the two of them start to go on and bicker to the point to where it's like once we get back to the shell of a man who is melting away, he's much more so dead or a corpse anyway, so there's nothing he could do about it anyways, because he's just so distracted by this dialogue with this woman, which is like, dude, dead man is gonna be befalling you this day, and you're just going on just chatting away with Chatty Cathy over there. All right. We also have Bill that goes into the throes of fighting with a hitman, and we'll come to find out that this man is to be connected to a guy named Duran, who was to have gone on and been with that woman who had died within the junkyard, and is to feasibly go on and be the bad guy of said film. And we'll see within the bit of credits how that is to go on and play out the way it does. So, with me going on and needing to talk about street trash, I feel that this movie is to, in all honesty, beyond its non-coherent dialogue throughout the film, be honestly to just be a visually interesting film, as well as also it just being fun, in my opinion. I would go on and I would recommend this movie, even though there is some bizarre nature to it, and go on to say at the end of the day that I have seen this movie, and I would recommend other people just trying it out, without a doubt, even though it is to be, of course, to have some things that I've talked about that may or may not interest people. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to push on into where can you see this movie, some future reviews, and then also me going and fully on breaking down this entire film, scene for scene, if you know what I mean, Vern, because it's about that time. So, firstly, I will go on and state where you can see Street Trash if you decide to do so. Firstly, I will go on and state that there is to be available on the Google Play Store if you are a mobile user, a app called Movie Box 3. I've been using this app quite a bit of time recently, and so it does actually work. You can actually watch the film there, and hopefully you will go on and decide to do so, so you'll be able to watch this movie for absolutely free. I would recommend a tablet or an iPad for you to be able to get a much more bigger viewing and maybe even a better viewing depending on what mobile device that you have. But regardless, you'll be able to see this movie for absolutely free. I'll go on and I'll give you a Google search for apps like Zelifonic, Zelivonic, or Moopzy, Moopzzi. You can go on and honestly need to Google search these because I think the first app isn't as easily found within the Google Play Store, but you'll be able to hopefully find it and hopefully be able to download it. I'll also go on and see Moopzy. You may go on and possibly need an APK download of this app, but regardless, I've been using Moopzy for a very long, Jevious amount of time, and it does work. You can see a huge number of catalog of things, but as far as suggestion, I'd probably just take the first thing that I had gone on to mention because seemingly you could be able to watch that app there and be able to see said movie. Other than that, I think it's about that time to talk about future reviews. My plan eventually in the future is to go back into Power Rangers, as you can kind of see here, Power Rangers and Helmet also there. I am to have just an interest of itch to scratch when it comes down to Power Rangers, so I'm going to go on and I'm going to start covering that again. At one point, I'd cover like 10 episodes in a video. I think I'm going to go on and cut that in half and just kind of focus on 5 episodes and see how long that takes and just be like, okay, maybe that'll be a better sweet spot to not have to go on for X number of hours to talk about those Power Ranger episodes. And then ultimately, I hope that that'll end up running into me just talking about Power Rangers more consistently because honestly, I've really missed it, as well as also I've just kind of been watching a lot of Power Rangers YouTubers lately, and I'm kind of just like, why don't I just go back into just talking about Power Rangers because I do really enjoy it. And also, it's a thing that I've gone on to have the ability to get certain shirts that'll connect to certain seasons. So, and I hope eventually I'll get the ability to eventually through Timu. My bad. Tubi is a whole different thing. Timu to eventually get more shirts at some point in the future. But anyways, uh, beyond anything else for future reviews will probably end up just kind of being stuff that I've already kind of said in past videos, and I'm kind of regurgitating any bit of that. But plus, also be kind of a random bit of thing that eventually will have people hear any number of these things. I still want to plan on going on in the next following 2 months and do stuff that is be a little bit more lighthearted, a lot of of, of stuff that are to kind of connect with the season of time, but also still try and do titles like this, even though it is in a much more horror direction. I just want to go on and just try as best as I can to just kind of give some diverse bit of content upon this channel that I've gone into in the past. So, trying as best as I can to put together some just kind of interesting bit of content in the future. But anyways, also, let's talk about my collection for a second here. This is the first video where I've gone on and actually seemingly just took it upon myself to put a bookcase behind me. That is to have a collection of stuff. I honestly was kind of shy about it, and then also I was to just be like, well, in recent time period, I've thought about even selling off certain pieces of my collection just because of personal reasons. Because logically, this video may end up just being a time capsule of a number of these things existing behind me. So it could just be a lot of fun to just have these just kind of kept here for a certain amount of time. And that could just be a thing that exists. But anyways, let's go on to the full-on breakdown of this film. I think it's about that time to say that it is, of course, spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. Let me know in the comments below what is to be your favorite melting movie or what is to be your favorite hobo film, because I'm sure there's a very rare amount of those occurring within our lives. Let me know in the comments below what is be your favorite variation of Street Trash. Maybe you like the original. Maybe you like the extra crispy. I don't know. At the end of the day, you can say that you can rattle off those of your enjoyment of either or neither or whichever. However you want to savor your flavor of talking about this movie and others. Let me know in the comments below also what is to be your favorite horror film of stuff, because maybe you have one of those. Maybe you want to go on and mention something that is to be similar of ilk of this film, and maybe I'll go on and I'll check that out. There is to probably be one film that I could probably go on and say is so weird enough that could probably be somewhat of a comparison to this movie. It is to at some point kind of be a musical movie, but also just be just so odd the way it starts out and the way it just goes on and is to be an existence of things that I think I would have to go on and compare this movie to stuff like Poultrygeist, because that is to be such a weird, oddballish of a film, and at the end of the day, could be ultimately something you could see if you dare to check a movie like that out. I would go on and definitively have people go into reviews about this. I haven't reviewed it myself because I was just kind of, I don't know about this one. But regardless, go ahead and check that movie out and see if that'll interest you. Because people may go on and just enjoy just oddballish visuals. Other than that, let's pause this video here, whip out whatever I need to whip out, without a doubt, to spout about what all is scene for scene happened within this entire film. Thank you for going on and watching this, because it may jump off at this point, and that's completely understandable. I like to just go on and just rattle off this entire film just because I just enjoy doing that. But then also, I am to, while talking about the film and its scene for scene, there are certain things that I want to go more in depth about and just talk about how I am to feel about them. So that's a more rationale for me going on and doing that certain piece of content, even though it is to just elongate the video. With that said, let's pause here and let me go on and be able to get all the cast list or whatever I insist to help me go on and prattle on. So let's pause here and let's get to that. All right. So in the very beginning of this film, we would come to find that there is a showcasing of this liquor store. So I was thinking in the very beginning of this piece, they were going to go on and just have a number of scenery shots because that's how every movie just begins, with just scenery shots. It's very weird that they go on and do that, but I think it's just an eating up of certain time when they're to just do intros of film. But anyways, we have this liquor store that is showcased here. There seems to be in the back of it the liquor store owner who is taking this bit of trash out, and Fred is to seemingly be behind a barrel, just kind of waiting for this trash to be thrown. Fred goes on and notices that this store owner is to seemingly be making his way back into the store, and Fred follows, kind of just very hauntingly, very much to try and hope that this guy will not go on and see him, because he's going to follow him into the store and try his best way possible to try and steal some of the merchandise or some of the liquor away from this guy, hoping that he's not going to see him and be able to kind of get away with this. Because Fred tries to go on and tries to, of course, steal alcohol instead of paying for it. So Fred goes on is to seemingly be hunching behind this guy and tries to go on and steal this hooch. And all of a sudden, the seemingly liquor store owner notices this guy, catches him as he turns, and is like, "Hey man, like you're stealing my bottle." So both Fred and liquor store owner are going on this chase, and all of a sudden, while Fred is continuing on this chase, he all of a sudden is to see this car that goes careening and crashes, and immediately this person who owns this car gets out of it and is to be chasing Fred as well, because of course, like, he wants this hobo to pay for this accident because he kind of caused it. So we continue to just have Fred being followed by a number of people that are all trying to chase him down, followed up by a character who I believe is gone by the name Wizzy. Uh, Wizzy? Yeah, Wizzy. Wizzy is to go on and be trying to be squeezing people out of money, and while he is to be in the thrust of taking his money, I believe, from a guy named Polly, Fred appears in between them and steals the money for himself and runs off with it. Wizzy is to again be a character that is to be following Fred here, because, like, hey, this guy stole my money, because this guy needs to go on and hand this money off to Bronson, and of course Bronson is to find out from Wizzy that, yeah, he's not going to get this money. So we continue on this path of Fred being chased by these bits of men, up until the point where he finally gets cornered between both car accident guy and Wizzy. We'll find Fred is to stumble upon this ladder that seemingly falls from the sky to go into this fire escape. Fred makes his way up this ladder, and come to find out, this building that Fred is going to make his way up to is also to be on fire. So we have certain people who are realizing that the building is on fire. So obviously, this will avoid Fred getting chased. So Fred goes on to stumble upon this one room within this apartment complex that again has a number of people laying on top of one another. And Fred is to go on and be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna get the heck out of here and try to escape, but also let these people know that this building is burning. So these people will go on and follow Fred and be unclothed as they make their way down the stairway. We also go on and have certain people that are grabbing just random items like a lamp and they're just making their way down the stairwell. Anyways, pushing on here. Fred finally goes on, gets out of the building, and makes his way into this garbage truck. He slides into the garbage truck, and eventually he comes to find that the garbage truck is starting to compress down. And Fred was to have forgotten the bit of money within this garbage truck. And by the time that he runs back for it to try to grab it, the garbage truck is closing to the point where he can't go on and retrieve the money. Again, while we'll come back to see that there are people still chasing Fred. We cue back to, or we cue to this junkyard that I believe is to be called the Statewide Junkyard. So, or that's what honestly I'm going to go on and call it because I keep seeing this huge sign that just says stateside, so that's what I'm calling it. So, this stateside junkyard, we would see just a plethora of different vehicles. We'll also see what looks to be a laughing gas or uh, balloon tank of sorts that we'll come to find in the later part of the film. There is one scene that delivers us having to use a laughing gas tank like this as a weapon, and that is kind of rather interesting to kind of see how these odd assortment of items actually play into the film when we get to the later piece of it. So here's where we go on and we have Wizzy, and Wizzy is making his way back to Bronson to confess that he had lost the money and eventually stating what had happened during the transgression of trying to get this money. And Bronson will go on and just be like, well, okay, now that I know where this money is, once I found this guy, I'm going to rip the liver out of his ass, and so on and so forth. So we have Fred making his way through the streets and going on, since he now has money, to make his way to the liquor store owned by Ed. Ed will come to find he is to have miraculously made his way into finding this crate. This crate that he goes on and opens. And in every horror movie, you never go on and you never open up the crate. There always is to be problems with opening up a crate in a horror film. So Ed goes on and opens up said crate and is to go on and realize there seems to be a bit of product that he could sell, regardless of how he is to realize that this product is not very age well because it's the 6-year-old or 60 years old of alcohol. Ed goes on and looks at it and is like, well, something to sell. So he goes on and does so. Because also, we're not always to be quite sure about the expiration dates of certain bits of alcohol because when looking at wine, wine goes on and is to seem to age well, but then again, also, different kinds of alcohol may not share the same ability. So, we have Fred that is to, of course, make his way into this liquor store. And Fred is to put this liquor a Viper to the counter, and we're expecting him to pay for it. All of a sudden, there seems to be a handicapped person that is to make his way into the store that is to fall over. And it seems that Ed is to consistently know this guy, and it seems that when he always comes in there, he always falls over. So while Ed is to go on and be distracted, Fred goes on and takes his alcohol and puts it into his pocket or sleeve of some kind and evades paying for this and then leaves. So the next thing we see is just a number of hobo-ish characters that are to seemingly go on and be trying to wipe these certain people's cars and cleans them, hoping that these people will give them money for doing said task. So we have a number of people in these cars. They're all to just going like, yeah, I really don't like this neighborhood, or oh my god, yeah, I don't want to go on and I don't want to deal with this. But they're ending up forced to deal with it anyways. So here is where Bronson makes his way into this same area. This will showcase how Bronson is to be this very intimidating force, and regardless of people being even nice to him, they will still go on and regret any interaction with this guy whatsoever. So we have this couple in this car, and this woman is going on and saying like, "Yeah, I don't really like this neighborhood. Oh yeah, like I think we should just try to drive past as quickly as we can, so on and so forth." So we will have Bronson that makes his way in front of this car, and as he of course is to go on and jump on top of it and then start talking to the people inside the vehicle, we would have a person that is on the driver's side who's the guy who's like, well, hey, like, it seems that you're a guy that is to be of former military status. Well, this guy starts going on and talking about how he was to be a guy in the reserves. He had gone on to shoot a machine gun, and I guess tried to relate to this guy in that manner, hoping that they can kind of get to some uh, common ground here. The driver goes on and is to say to Bronson, "Hey, yeah, like I'm willing for you to go on and kind of clean my windshield or whatever, like whatever you want to do." And so, in kind, we would have Bronson who tears this guy out of his car, and then we get to see, I guess, the perspective of this guy because we see this camera that has these glasses on it, and he's of course getting kind of just chucked around. And we'll come to find that this driver ends up getting thrusted into the windshield and his face all mangled and killed. And then we'll also see that Bronson on the side of him has this bone that he had taken uh, with him from his time in the military and still is to this day somehow have on him. So Bert, one of the other hobos, is to go on and see this off from the distance and stop what he's doing and walk away from the car, leaving the driver to just be upset with Bert, like, "Hey man, like you just left all this on my windshield." So Fred goes on and is talking to Polly, a guy that eventually will steal away Fred's alcohol without him noticing. Because also Fred will get beaten up by Fred and be checked if he is to have his money, and he doesn't. So uh, Wizzy will go on and kick Fred and then leave him. So we have Polly that as he leaves, he goes on like, and I thought that was kind of funny. So the next thing we see here is Polly making his way to this very heavily uh, just devolved building where it seems that when he goes into this restroom, there's to be no ceiling above it or much of walls or anything. So Polly makes his way to this supposed turlet, which is to, I'm sure, not be active. And Polly decides to take upon this viper and starts to drink it. All of a sudden, his tongue starts to turn blue, and then we'll start to realize that his feet is all of a sudden to start to be bleeding this blue liquid of sorts. Further and further, Polly is to look at his hand, and his hand is to start to shrivel and start to decay away. Further and further, Polly will start to be seemingly bleeding a blue liquid, which seems to be very unusual. We don't have all the hobos sharing that exact same color scheme when they go on and they consume this viper. It seems that there'll just be a barrage of different colors for different people. Yellows, sort of in a purples and oranges and like, yeah, it'll change from person to person. Some people have orange. Like, I don't know what definitively any of those colors are to actually mean for why they are to be chosen, but I guess it's just an interesting just color palette to have in this film. So interestingly enough, Polly, once he's starting to slowly shrivel away here, we have his legs that eventually, like the feet separate from his legs, and then Polly is to be sunking further and further into this toilet, to where Polly is to be grabbing on uh, this bit of rope that is being used normally to flush the toilet, but Polly is trying to hang on to it so he can try to survive here. Because again, this guy is trying to save himself. Polly further is to sink further and further down into this toilet to the point where all that's left of him is to just be this goop of a face, which goes down further into the toilet. And then eventually there'll be like a handprint or some feet, and that's all that is to be really left of this person's body. So back to the statewide junkyard. So now we have a character named Wendy. Wendy, it seems, is to be a person infatuated with one of the homeless characters here. And I'm trying to. I believe his name is Kevin. If I'm wrong about that, then my apologies. Wendy goes on and is to be a person that owns, or not owns, is to seemingly be working at this junkyard and is to be working alongside the owner, who I believe is Frank. They'll call him Fat Frank. They'll call him any number of names in this movie. They'll say his last name instead of first, but this guy is Frank. So Wendy goes on and stumbles into a place where she is to seemingly be ever so near to Kevin while he's sleeping. Once Kevin is to finally go on and notice this woman, they fall over one another. And so, come to find out, Kevin will have been having a nightmare. And at some point, Wendy is to talk about how this guy sleeps, and they will continue to have a conversation between one another, which will eventually will also lead to them to have a brief bit of intimacy between one another, as it seems there's an attraction there. It also seems that this girl Wendy will go on and be talking to this guy, and we'll find out that he's going to be given like $5 for certain things and so on and so forth. So just kind of a bit of rapport between the two of them. But anyways, we have Wendy that is to hear over the loudspeaker that Frank is interested in her coming back into the building because he wants his food. Not quite sure how exactly Wendy is to be having food on her, but it seems that she does because her hands are empty. So, when Wendy makes her way back to Frank and the two of them have this argument between one another, and Frank is to go on and start to be upset with Wendy about how she's going on and spending too much time with the hobos within this junkyard, and he's saying it's like, well, hey, I'm not here to set up a babysitting service and this and that, and how Frank is to go on and be tempted to get the authorities into the junkyard to get rid of these hobos, but he does not go on and actually do so. And also, there is the threatening of Wendy not going on and continuing doing this job. And Frank is like, well, hey, I pay you like $150 a week. And I'm like, wow, that's actually pretty good. Probably compared to the time period, because I'm like, yeah, like $150 a week. Wow. Uh, that could be pretty good considering probably how low she's probably getting an hour, maybe. Anyways, so the two of them are having this argument, and eventually it'll lead to Frank's leaving. So the next thing we see here is Fred, who's down on the ground and he's sleeping, and Bert is to wake him up. Fred, of course, had gotten beaten up by Wizzy, and so that's the reason why he's just kind of passed out here. So when Bert starts to wake him up, the two of them, of course, start to talk here, and Fred is to mention what happened to him. So the next thing we see is another homeless person who I believe doesn't have a name here that I could actually find, and he goes on and he makes his way. I think it's probably called like the old hobo or the elderly hobo, or maybe he's like the gray haired hobo. I don't know. Either way, this guy is to, considering his hobo-ish status, is to seemingly be wearing a wedding outfit, which he goes on and he is to share a bit of story of Ed, of his backstory when he gets into the liquor store after he goes on and takes a Viper. He goes on to explain how he was to try and bet it all on his life. Like he used stuff like his wife and his kids and every bit of his life and try to bet on it, and he lost it all. And while this hobo is talking to Ed and having this bit of conversation, we further and further realize that it's honestly going nowhere, but this guy is trying to go on and try to smarten Ed up in a bizarrish way, which again just really goes nowhere. But further that this conversation goes, it is just rather entertaining between the two of these characters to just have Ed just being like, yeah, 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 whatever. Like, I'm sure he gets these characters all the time that just come in here and he just has to deal with them and hopes that they will leave. Uh, like, the hobo goes on and he says, like, well, do you think I got it easy? And Ed's like, no, I think you got it cheap because you only uh, gone on to give me $1 for this. So this hobo leaves this alcoholic store, uh, saying that Ed needs to get a job. This guy owns a store. This guy is to be an owner of business. But I guess that's not good enough for this hobo. So hobo goes on and makes his way through town and stumbles in on this officer Bill, who's to grab said hobo and be demanding bits of information about the junkyard and hoping that this guy will have uh, certain things that will play into what this guy needs. But then again, uh, like Bill is to tell this hobo guy, hey, don't leave town because I'm going to, within the next 24 hours, I'm going to get back to you and want you to give me some information. So the hobo walks off, makes his way into a fire escape, and is to talk about the cop and kind of cusses him out and swears at him and what have you off in the distance. Then goes on and says how he's living in a condominium, which is really just a fire escape, and how he has his own place and nobody bothers him there. So as finally the hobo goes on and swigs down this Viper beverage, we all of a sudden have this black cat that is making its way near this homeless person, and is to start to just kind of have this cat just cock its head as we start to see this hobo turning yellow and spraying this yellow liquid throughout his body to the point to where we see this hole of his shoe that is starting to leak out yellow. All this yellow substance is to start to platter down onto the ground to have a number of people underneath this fire escape start to get into what I would call a splash zone. So this number of business people are all going on and just walking their way past this fire escape. And one of the businessmen is to go on and start to see this dropping of this yellow substance, and he's kind of like, okay, where is this coming from? So the businessman kind of pokes his head up and is to all of a sudden get splattered a bit of yellow upon his face, which is to thrust him into running off, trying to avoid this pain of this acid like substance that has fallen upon him, but there's no way to avoid it at this point. So, Bill, the cop, makes his way into finding said businessman, grabs him, and then turns him to sit on this side of the street because he's honestly almost kind of making his way into traffic. So, Bill grabs the guy, sets him down, and is starting to realize that this seemingly yellow has started to encompass his entire face. So we would have Bill that starts to turn to a number of businessmen that appear from behind him and starts to ask what had happened here. How did this all occur? So Bill goes on and starts asking these random people what had happened, and they would start to explain how this all happened, how it just kind of was to just kind of fall from this fire escape from a couple of blocks ago. So we would have this businesswoman that gets into this argument with Bill, and all we're doing is focusing on this argument to the point of now this businessman who has gotten this yellow goop upon him is to just be dying away. So Bill and this woman having this conversation and talking about tape recorders and going on and talking about traffic violations and all these things, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, dead person. So Bill goes back to him to realize it's too late. Now back to the junkyard. We would go and have Bronson, who's in the throes of intimacy with Winchet, or whatever this girl is, who's be at his seemingly leash of what I would say bedside, but junkyard side. So, and then off in the distance, we would see Wizzy and another homeless man. Bronson is to see Wendy be walking her way through the junkyard, and Bronson stops what he's doing with Winsett and is to take attention to Wendy. We'll come to find that Bronson is to look at Wendy and is to see her as someone that he is to have seen in the past within his military time. And eventually there'll be a whole flashback thing of that when Bronson is to sleep at some point within this film. So Bronson starts to make his way through the junkyard as Wendy and Kevin are having this bit of dialogue here, talking about the exchange of money that Kevin was to have gone on and gotten, and how he had gotten $5 from a guy named Mario. So Winslet at a certain point is to kind of be upset with Bronson about him going on and paying attention to this woman instead of her. So Bronson will eventually go on and hurt Winslet for going on and making him look bad in front of the other hobos. Because, yeah, you have to look good in front of all these other hobos. Yeah. Then he'll go on and he'll state that at least this woman, when said, is good for getting what he wants out of her, which is basically uh, just intimacy. And that, of course, is becoming because Wizzy is to say how he should just kind of get rid of Winsett, but Bronson chokes him out. It's like, no, like she's better than a lot of other women that are around here. So Bert and Fred make their way back to the junkyard, and Wendy and Kevin finish up with their conversation. And Fred makes his way back, or Kevin makes his way back to Fred and Bert. So they'll go on to find that since Kevin has $5, Bert is going to take this money and make his way to the grocery store to do some shopping. I say shopping because he'll go on and he'll steal a bunch of goods. So the next thing we'll have a bit of disagreement between both Fred and between both Kevin as they make their way in to seemingly this kind of just underground little nook of this junkyard, and they get their way to their beds, and they have this disagreement about Godzilla movies and how at one point they had spent time with their father, and how it seems that their father had not liked a certain kind of people, and also, that is to be the reason why that the two of them weren't allowed to watch Godzilla films. But Fred is having this conversation with Kevin, I guess, to also just to give him caution of about getting with this woman, and I think that's the real crux of this argument between the two of them. So Bert goes on and makes his way to this grocery store and is to find this receipt laying on the ground. This receipt will have just dog food because, of course, this woman leaves this grocery store with a dog on her side. So Bert makes his way into this grocery store to eventually smack into this, I believe, this display or just this grocery item that is to be within the store. Bert goes on into one of these aisles and is to seemingly find an assortment of condominiums. Like we'd have him like getting like mustard and stuff. I'm like, why is that to be of any importance for him to take these items? Because if anything, he's gonna get larger and larger amount of items, and yeah, like at some point, it's kind of silly for him to go on and get just condiments. Bert continues to make his way through this place to find certain items that he won't actually have to cook. Even at one point, he grabs this huge slab of watermelon and he's like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to fit this in my pants. So he gets cantaloupes instead. The further and further Bert slides this meat and all these items down his pants, we have an elderly woman that notices this guy going on and doing it, and the two of them start to have an argument. Uh, and Bert says, "What are you staring at, Biz?" So this woman is obviously noticing that this guy is stealing, and so she's going to alert the manager, and so she leaves. Of course, we get all the hunkies and the and then this and that out of this because a bit of fun here of dialogue. So, and the woman goes, "How dare you?" as she walks off. So Burke continues to just like continues to hedge his bets here about how long he can go on to still steal these items, and so he does. We eventually have elderly woman that comes back with a person that obviously works at the store. It seems that he has this blazer of sorts. He's wearing seemingly a nice bit of clothing here. I think he does have a name tag of sorts that I think is around his waist. But either or, he is to go on and be a person that works here. That is to have a bickering match between both him and Bert. So let's say that this is a store manager because I'm not quite sure exactly if that is to be that. So the manager goes on and starts talking to Bert. He notices that there seems to be some meat that is sliding down his pant leg that is to be protruding from his boots. So the manager goes on and asks Bert if he has some kind of way for paying for these items that are sliding down his pants. And Bert is to go on and say, it's like, well, hey, I have a receipt that I can hand you that'll say I have paid for these items. The manager will go on and look at the receipt, like, all this receipt says is dog food. And Bert is to go on and like, well, hey, it's not my fault that you guys would confuse dog food with the stuff that is sliding down my pants. So we have Bert that further goes on and is to start to heckle this manager and saying like, well, hey, why don't you pull down your pants and show your lily white butt and this and that. And just the further of escalation in this, like there's a bit of hilarious dialogue, but it's also just like I think at a point in time we would probably go on, especially if we've worked at a retail store in our lifetime, see these scenes play out and go on to probably remember like certain things happened. Like I had gone on and worked at a retail store, and I think at one point we had somebody that went through the car parts aisle and they slid a windshield wiper into their coat. And there was nothing I could do because we didn't actually have security at that time. Because I ended up alerting somebody about it, but there was like, well, hey, there's nothing we can do because we don't have security. So yeah, so this guy's just gonna get away with this because there's nothing we can do. So I was like, well, okay, all right, like at least I said something. At least I spoke up. I didn't confront the guy either because that would have been weird. But yeah, but there have been times in the past where mistakes have been made, uh, and people have stolen things. But anyways, so the manager is to go on and tell Bert that he's going to get the security uh, for Bert to have a confrontation between them. So at this point, Bert is to say, it's like, well, heck yeah, let's go on and let's go to the security. I want to meet with this guy. I even want to go on and talk to your superiors. And then the following thing we see is Bert thrusting through this store and cussing and moaning and making his way through this checkout aisle, and he throws a bag over his head and thrusts through this window and breaks through it and then escapes. So the next thing we see is Bill with this coroner. They have found Polly's body, the disheveled mess that is left to be. Both Bill and both coroner are trying to figure out what had exactly happened here. They're thinking that it might have been some. Let me pause here for a second. My apologies. I guess I didn't realize that my device wasn't charging while I was going on and doing this. So, if anything, that is a bit of news to me. So, regardless, let's go on and let's continue this review. So, Bill goes on and starts talking to this coroner, and then another detective known as Jimmy. Or maybe his name is Roman. Either way, uh, these two detectives here, both Bill and this other detective, they start to have this conversation, and they start to mention how hard it is for what they're trying to go on and trying to accomplish from their day to day. Bill goes on and talks to this guy, and is to state, hey, like maybe if you kind of scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. If I help you tonight, maybe you'll go on and you'll help me tomorrow. So the two of them agree to working together, and eventually we'll also see this other corpse that'll seemingly be on display here. And the smell of it and everything like that, of course, of a dead body, will of course have these guys just eventually transition us to now being back to Bronson in the junkyard. Bronson here is to go on in this very long stretch of dialogue to be talking about his military past, and goes further and further on about it. It's a very long stretch of him going into this thing about outstanding chow and everything here that is to go on and just be just kind of a spouting of this guy just kind of boasting about his military experience. So follow this up with Fred, Bert, and Kevin's kind of hideaway here. And I guess I did get the Kevin name right when looking at this. So the three of them go on and they share this bit of food that Bert had somehow slipped between his legs and kept. And it is also kind of interesting in the background. I'll talk about this. In the background, they have these little bit of statues that are to be of Hulk and Spider-Man, and I thought that was really cool that they had that in the background. And at first, I was kind of looking. It's like, is that Hulk? Because like I couldn't tell at first, but then I was like, oh yeah, it is Hulk. Because we see them more prevalent here, but we also could have seen them kind of briefly earlier. But if anything, let's push on here. Finally, as Bert is to leave after these people have kind of shared this meal, he's to be walking away with this Walkman, and Fred is to be so confused about how he has it, and Bert is to be talking about Jackie Brown. As the two of these, uh, both Fred and Kevin, make their way to their beds to sleep, we have a number of people also doing the same. Here is where we'll go on and we'll have Bronson, who will have this dream of his military past, seemingly having Bronson more clean shaven, making his way through the battleground, facing off against uh, these. Uh, I believe people of Japanese descent. I believe. If I'm wrong about that, my apologies. It's not to be meant that way. So, as Bronson would make his way through the battleground, these people will be coming through the shadows and having seemingly vampire teeth and are biting Bronson in the leg. Which I'm like, okay, what the heck is going on here? Bronson in his dream is crying in pain, and we also see people dealing with the cries and screams of him also in this junkyard. Bronson continues his dream sequence to make his way through the battleground to find a woman or refugee that he is to save. And then after saving her, there seems to be an explosion that goes off into the background. And the two of them end up sharing this intimacy to where Bronson is to be removing his tank top. And what a character is to look very much like Wendy is to be satisfying Bronson after the rescuing of her. Bronson finally goes on to wake up from his dream and have the hallucination of war to have been in that dream sequence. Immediately, Bronson is to take this grenade and undo the pin and throw it, and the grenade goes off, waking up a number of people. Bronson is to scream and cry about how there needs to be a better defense of this junkyard, and he's yelling at people because of it. So, the following thing we are to go on and see is Fred is making his way to of course Ed's liquor store to find out that he cannot go on and make his way in there because he was hoping that he could probably steal another bottle of hooch away from Ed. But by the time he gets there, I believe the store is closed, so he walks away. Fred goes on to make his way through an alley to find a woman vomiting all over it, hunched over, very much to be so intoxicated that she doesn't know who's in front of her. This woman goes on and assumes that the person next to her is to be a guy named Nicky, which we'll come to find is a guy named Duran. So this woman will go on to be hunched over, vomiting away, and looking at Fred next to her, assuming that this is Nicky. And this woman continues to tell Fred that she's horny and that she wants to go on and have the two of them uh, just go at it. And further, that this takes ever so longer for Fred to take this woman and bring her back to his junkyard. This woman is to consistently say, "Hey, let's do this right here." Like she doesn't care. She's gonna go out and do it in public. We would off in the distance go on and see a chef that pokes his way out to see the two of them walk away here. And the chef goes on and lights a cigarette and then makes his way back into the restaurant. Fred and woman pass the opening of said restaurant, and the doorman is to notice the two of these people together. And it seems that the doorman is not to very much stop this woman from leaving, even though he probably does go on and know who this woman is to end up being with, and that is to be, of course, Duran, who ends up owning the store. He's to be kind of I would say, a mob or gangster-esque like character that will go on and tell this doorman that he's dead, just because, like, seriously, you didn't know that this woman was mine, and you let her just leave away with this hobo. And Duran will go on and be alerted of his woman leaving away without him, and so he'll make his way to the doorman and be yelling and screaming at him because of that occurrence. Because the chef will go on and alert Duran about what had happened and will be out there with him. So the next thing we go on and see here is Fred with this woman getting back to the junkyard, finally making their way to Fred's hideout. We have a number of homeless people that are kind of all coming out of the woodwork, being like, "All right, we're probably going to see something naked here." So a lot of hobos all get out of the woodwork, even Wizzy, and they're seeing through the poke holes of this hideout what is going on between both Fred and this woman. Fred is talking to this woman, and she's saying that she wants a kiss. And Kevin is to be alerted of what's going on next to him. And Kevin is to be told by Fred, "Hey, you should get out of here. This is not a place for a young guy like you." To really just have Kevin to be told, "Hey, scram, get out of here," for Kevin to go on and make his way into sleeping elsewhere, just finding a random place to sleep. So, as Fred goes on and gets the clothing off of this girl, and the two of them go at it, we have a bunch of hobos off in the distance that are huffing and puffing, as well as also probably giving themselves a low hand five, if you know what I mean. So, after Kevin is to leave and Fred is to go into intimacy with this woman, eventually getting to a point where he is to be done with this woman, and the woman is to go on and demand more, to where all of a sudden hobos are coming out of the shadows, pulling away this woman, and she's to scream and cry and demand for people to stop, and saying that they're hurting her. Eventually, we'll find the body just displayed somewhere later after this group has had their way with her. The next thing we see is Wizzy. Wizzy is to go on and be making his way through town and have a number of people all grab him and start to beat him up. Shortly thereafter that, there seems to be a police van that comes driving by, which then has all the people stop attacking this hobo, Wizzy. Bill and this other detective will go on and grab said Wizzy, pull him into this van, because again, they're going to be using a guy like Wizzy for information, as we've kind of gone on to have Bill, the other hobos, give him information in the past. So Wizzy gets trucked in the back of this van, and we'll come to find that there's a number of ladies of the night or prostitutes that are in the back of this that are all going on and questioning if Wizzy is going to be able to have the ability to pay them for some kind of service, which it seems that one person is like, well, hey, if you got the cash, like I'm willing to just kind of put my uh, fingers over my nose and just get paid anyways. Wizzy is to go on and mention that he hasn't had a shower in months, and that is to be the reason for his stench. So, once Wizzy is to seemingly be almost into intimacy with this one woman, Bill is to kind of thrust this little hole of this van to start talking to Wizzy and asking about the whole people that have been going melting recently. And when Bill is starting to ask Wizzy about this, like, well, hey, like, if you go on and you give me a bit of information, maybe I'll give you a shower and and clean you up a bit. So Wizzy is to go on and really have no information to give this guy, and then also it's like, hey man, like tempting me with a shower or anything, like it's not going to change me going on and telling you anything. So Bill gets upset, kind of chucks Wizzy back to where he falls over, and he starts to pee all over the ground. The women will start to notice this, and they will try to evade or avoid getting sprayed with the urine. So the next thing we see is Wizzy the following day, who it seems is getting a little bit more of a cleaner outfit to him, and is coming out of this vehicle with just a huge number of bottles that are all around him, and he's trying to sift through it and try to find any number of them that still has a drop of alcohol inside of them. The next thing we see here is Wendy and Frank. Frank is seemingly on top of Wendy as she's in this chair, and he's trying to get intimacy out of her. But Wendy is thrusting Frank away as best she can, because Frank is quite a bit of beefy bit of man, and so Wendy will go on and have seemingly troubles trying to evade said man. So the further and further that Frank is to try to open this woman's legs to try to get what he wants out of her, the further and further that it seems that this is not going to go Frank's way. Frank goes on and decides to eventually have a heart attack and fall on top of Wendy. And now Wendy is like, "Oh my god, this guy is to have had a heart attack, and I need to figure out a way to slip away, or otherwise I'm going to die with this guy on top of me." So Wendy all of a sudden notices that there's a phone nearby her that is starting to ring. Wendy hopes that this phone will continue to ring so that way she can answer it and hope that that'll be help. Wendy tries to get to the phone, and eventually she'll come to find that Frank is actually still alive after all, and is to go on and make fun and make jokes, to where Wendy is to go on like, really? Like, I really thought that you were dead, and that I was going to probably be buried alive here with Frank on top of her. So Frank finally does go on and get off of Wendy, and they're now like jostling throughout the room, just like, okay, like how am I gonna evade Frank here? So Wendy, I believe, does go on and attack Frank and then leaves. Frank goes on and starts to make his way through the junkyard and is to go on and complain about his life. And he's like, I have a wife, I have kids, and I have a weird dog that's to lick my pants for some odd reason. So Frank continues to make his way through the junkyard and is looking at all these random bit of homeless men and tell them to get out of here, get out of my yard. So Frank will realize off in the distance that there is a dead woman without clothes that is to seemingly be sprawled out. So Frank goes on, notices this one, drags her off to then possibly have her way, to have his way with her because dead corpse. So it's interesting how Frank will go on, and when he meets up with Bill the cop, he goes on and asks, like, well, hey, yeah, this dead body, like, you won't be able to determine the semen of who was to have gone on and attacked this woman, right? And Bill goes on and says no, but the last person who had had her way with her had syphilis. It's like, oh, so maybe Frank is going to concoct some VD here. So Fred makes his way into the junkyard, and it seems that a bunch of homeless men are to be kind of waking up for the day. And Fred will have a quick interaction with Winslet, and then Fred will go on and be fighting Bronson here. Bronson, of course, will go on and be upset with Fred because if you forgot, Fred had taken some money in the very beginning of this film from Wizzy, and so Bronson is going to beat this guy up to get it back because the two of them have finally had this interaction between the two of them finally. So all of a sudden, while Bronson is to be in the midst of killing this man with a bone in his hand, there's to be another bone that seems to be protruding out of some little gap that is to be peeing this yellowish liquid called urine. So Bronson is to go on and kind of be upset that someone is urinating on him. So Bronson goes on to notice this and rips the source of this urine from off of said man and is to just be holding a dick in his hand. So we will find that this injured man is a scream in pain, and we have Frank off the distance like yuck. So we now start to go on and have Bronson starting this whole keep away thing with this injured guy scrambling to try and get his Schwanz back, desperately saying that he wants to put it on ice and everything like that. So we continue to have this keep away, even to the point to where Winslet is to have this doll and she puts it underneath it, and then Bronson is to notice, hey, did you just take that? And then Winslet's like, okay, chuck it, and so this thing just starts to fly through the air as a number of these homeless person are all to try to catch it and just continue to play this game. So it's very goofy and very weird, but it exists. So finally, the Ender manages to go on in a very like football catch here, as he's to be kind of running and then catches it. Makes his way to this taxi cab, but there's no way that he's going to be able to pay for it. And the taxi just drives off anyways. Like, dude, there's no way that I'm going to go on and I'm going to have you come in my cab. So the injured man just grabs onto a school bus and tries to make his way to the hospital in that manner. So The next thing we see here is all the homeless men who are just kind of like, ah, look at that guy. We make our way to the police station as Bill starts talking to the guy behind the counter. And he talks about them finding a floater that's a female brunette Caucasian. Kind of more so getting to the fact of like she probably doesn't really belong there, and if anything, maybe she was looking for a strange manicure. So they will come to find that Duran is to be the guy connected to this woman, and Bill will then go on to meet with said Duran and Doorman, and Bill will go on and be like, well, yeah, I know that this is really hard right now, and my heart bleeds for you, and but it's also kind of really funny how Bill is interacting with this doorman and interacting with Duran, and the doorman is like really spilling his guts about Duran and being very brutally honest about him to the point where, of course, Duran gets very upset, and the doorman thinks that he's going to have some kind of like immunity from Duran, and the doorman says to Bill, it's like, well, hey, I'll get some witness protection program, right? And Bill's like, we don't do that here. So the doorman is like, oh, so the doorman is like, well, and like Duran is like, yeah, you're gonna be dead. Like as soon as you leave here, dead. You're gonna be dead to me. So we even get to the point where I think Durant does go on and try to choke this doorman out for how upset he is. But anyways, uh, Bill is going on and telling Duran that he does not want him to go on and put the law into his own hands and let Bill kind of do what he needs to do with this whole situation because he knows that Duran has the power to go on and do like his own brand of justice. So right after we leave these people, we make our way back into the junkyard and we find this hitman. This hitman is getting out of this car and putting a gun into his suit. So Fred is within this junkyard and he makes his way into this bathroom and he goes seemingly near the urinals. The hitman is to go on and follow him and is to mention, hey, can you do two things at once? Fred looks at him, it's like, what? Like, I think so. Yeah, what are you asking? So the hitman goes on and says, like, well, hey, uh, if anything, I think it's your time to pray because I got a little present for you. So as the two of them are just whipping it out and letting it hang, we have Fred that goes on to hit this guy in the junk and then he falls over. So when Fred leaves this bathroom and a hitman is to follow, Bill is to be surprisingly there. Bill stops this hitman from attacking Fred, and as the hitman is to whip out this gun, we have Bill that goes on to say, "Hey, wouldn't you want to go on and God, what is it? What is it that he says? He says, when you want to go on and die in a fight instead of being in prison." So the hitman goes on and like, okay, all right, like I'll put away my gun and we'll fight it out. So both Bill and the hitman, they're having a bit of combat here. Fred is watching on and he's like, holy sh, and and is to be like, okay, like this is interesting here. So the hitman gets his licks in, but we'll come to find that Bill is to really very much overpower him, get quite a bit of punches in, and eventually win this fight. To a point where Bill drags the hitman back to the urinal, slaps him down on the urinal, and is to vomit on him and then leave. And one seemingly man comes out of the bathroom, is like, oh, well, so is to see the body there. So Bill leaves the junkyard, and we have Frank following behind him. That's when he asks them about the dead woman and if they know who was to have been the person who has had their way with her. And that's when he talks about the whole syphilis thing. And then he gets into his car and makes his way, driving to Darren's car. Bill goes on and tells Darren, it's like, well, hey, like I told you not to go on and do what you did, but you did it anyways, and uh, like I kind of took out your messenger, and so the two of them start to have this argument between one another, and then Duran is to tell his driver to drive off here. Bill goes on and gets out of his car and takes his jacket off. Fred and Kevin are to be in their hideout, and the two of them are going on and talking. They're having a disagreement here. Eventually, this disagreement will lead to Fred going on and saying that he wants to devote the rest of his life to getting away from Kevin here because of how this disagreement is to just escalate. And Kevin is like, well, hey, where am I supposed to go? So Bill makes his way into the junkyard and is to try and find Bronson within it. At a certain point, we have Bill who assumes that Bronson is in this one area of the junkyard, and he uncovers this tarp to come to find Winsett is there, and Bronson is to be behind uh, Bill here. So Bill ends up getting stabbed in the back by Bronson, and the two of them start to duke it out. We have Bill that goes on and is to also take Winsett and kind of do this like military press and just kind of chuck her just because they're continuing to fight. So Bronson goes on and also is to take Bill over his shoulder and also take down Bill here. Between the two of them fighting, we'll have Bronson that is to choke out Bill so much so that we're thinking that Bronson is actually going to go on and kill him here. But Bronson kind of leaves Bill before that happens. Fred makes his way back to Ed's liquor store and is to say how he's having a bad day, and here's $1 for finally Fred to get this hooch. Also, while having a disagreement with Ed yelling at him, and then eventually leaving the store. So Fred is to finally get this hooch, and it seems that he's going to be close to finally consuming it. And all the while, we have this other hobo that's alongside Fred that is to also be consuming this hooch before Fred does. This hobo is going to be kind of the heavier set guy that's to be wearing all blue and have the suspenders. So this guy goes on and he is to take this hooch, and his chest is to seemingly blow up like a balloon. Fred is to go on and unbottle or uncap this bottle of hooch and be tempted to drink it. But then all of a sudden, when this other hobo is to start to expand his chest the way it does, to where Fred is to be hearing the sound of this, and then try to figure out what's going on and see the Viper bottle and notice that this guy is about to explode. Fred runs off underneath this car to avoid the blast, of which that is to kind of have things be sprayed all over the place. Fred gets from out of the vehicle and is to try to avoid the spray because he knows that he'll get just acidity upon his body. So Fred realizes that the hooch is to be poisonous. So Fred is trying as best as he can to run his way to Ed's place to alert him of what's going on here. All the while, we also have Wizzy in the background. So Fred goes on and notices Wizzy and is like, well, since I know that this alcohol is poisoned and I don't like Wizzy, guess what I'm going to do? Fred goes on and takes the poison and is to use this as a weapon against Wizzy to try to get rid of him, to try to kill him here. So Fred goes on to just mock and badmouth Wizzy to the point where the two of them have this argument. Wizzy grabs the hooch away from Freddy, and also Bert is to get in the mix of this. Fred tries to tell Bert, hey man, just let him keep the bottle and let him go because he'll die. Wizzy isn't really quite overhearing what exactly is to be stated between the two of these people, so he's kind of oblivious. So Bert had even gotten to a point of getting back the hooch for Wizzy, and Fred is just like, hey man, just give it back to him, figure out a way. So Wizzy does get the hooch. He does smack Bert on the back with this pipe and gets the hooch back. So Fred talks to Wizzy and says, hey man, I'm sick. I haven't had a bit of alcohol for too many days now. Like, hey man, don't go on and don't take that hooch away from me. Come on, please. And so yeah. Also, Bert goes on and talks about how or Fred talks about how like, hey, hey, forget about him and just go on and Wizzy, just do what you're gonna do, which is drink this thing. So Wizzy goes on and consumes the alcohol and is to start to be leaking from his neck. And Fred is like, Wizzy, you hobo. Wizzy starts spraying from his mouth and eventually is to start to be like putting his hands through his body as there seems to be some indents there. And this guy is leaking. So this guy is to be leaking so many barrage of different colors. It's like a Jackson Pollock film or Jackson Pollock painting or whatever. Just the barrage of different kind of assortment of things going on here. So Fred goes on and is to try to tell Bert that he has to leave here because he needs to make his way back to Ed's because he has to let him know about the dangers of this alcohol. Ed is at his liquor store and he goes on and makes his way to the crate and he himself is to be interested in this alcohol because so many others has consumed it themselves. Plus, also it's cheap, so Ed just wants to see what everybody's going on and and doing with this alcohol. So by the time that Fred makes his way to the liquor store, it's too late. Ed is leaking, and so he's gonna go on and get so close to Fred where Ed is a little bit of leaking all over Fred here to the point where Fred is trying to brace himself of the leaking Ed. So there is seemingly blood dripping from Ed's boots here as his face is starting to shrink and we eventually see even uh, people of cars that are be passing by to realize that Ed is dying here. Fred at one point goes on and is to accidentally fall into a car, and a guy is to get out of it. And of course, the two of them are having a disagreement. Back with Bronson, he's at the junkyard and he is carving away at this bone. Then the next thing we see here is Bronson, I think, getting a flashback of him being at the war and him getting a bone from this person's leg, and that was to be, I guess, the first bone that he was to ever go on and have. So we have a number of homeless men that are to go on and make their way to Bronson. They end up handing him the Viper, and so he takes it. We have Wendy that goes on and is meeting up with Kevin here, and the two of them are having a conversation. This eventual conversation leads to Kevin touching Wendy's thigh, and they're to realize that they're going to be alone for an hour of time, so Wendy is finally going to get intimate with Kevin. We have Winsett that is to be upset with Bronson about how she for what she goes on and does for Bronson, that him not sharing this hooch with her is to kind of be upsetting to her. So she grabs it away from Bronson before he takes a drink. Winsett starts to go on and takes a swig of this, and eventually she's leaking from her chesticles, from her melons, from her yabos. So she starts leaking all over the place. Bronson doesn't understand what the heck had happened here, and further we see Winsett just start to leak onto this item and fade away. The further we see both Wendy and Kevin walk off here, Bronson is to eventually follow. Wendy and Kevin make their way into this office, and here is where Wendy goes on to show her chest to Kevin and start to take his shirt off, stating that they have an hour of whatever they want to do here between the two of them. Bronson, of course, interrupts, because of course he does, and grabs Kevin and drags him off because he wants to kill him. Because I guess since Bronson is seeing Wendy as a person that looks like someone from his past and that had been at some point a woman of his, that he is to be upset with Kevin for taking that from him. So Kevin eventually is to evade said Bronson and is starting to run away from him. When Kevin is to be running away from Bronson, eventually Bronson will find yet another hobo that ends up getting in his way. and Bronson just takes this bone and shoves it into his neck and kills this random hobo, and he falls and bleeds out onto this truck, uh, onto this car that is to be kind of very junked. Moving on. So Bronson is to try to figure out where Kevin is, going through this junkyard to eventually, when Kevin is to finally get to this place where it seems that he can kind of get to a place where there's a bunch of things just kind of sticking out that he can probably use as a weapon, to hope that this is going to be a perfect place for him to just kind of hide it out for a bit. We would then have Bronson, who finds Kevin, and is to just jostle these items, forcing then Kevin to need to continue to run away from Bronson. Kevin falls and is forcing his way down this staircase, and Bronson follows. Bronson then does go on and is met by Fred. Fred is to tell Kevin, it's like, hey man, I'm here to help. And Fred is to seem to have these vipers, and he's now going on and taking these things and he's using them as weapons. Which, not quite sure exactly when Fred had come to getting these, but he got them anyways. So Fred is starting to chuck these vipers, and one of them hits Bronson in the face. Bronson eventually will start to decay here, but feasibly this won't be an exact way of taking this guy out quite yet. Bronson starts chasing after Fred, and Bronson grabs Fred and starts to choke him down on the ground, still while Bronson is also probably decaying. Kevin makes his way into stumbling upon these little laughing gas, like oxygen tank like things, or also the helium tanks that of course would be used to like blow up balloons. Kevin stumbles upon these things and is to realize he can use one of them as a weapon. So he finds this rock and he breaks the end of one of these tanks. It goes flying, and this ends up getting used as a weapon to hit Bronson. And when that does happen, all of a sudden we see Bronson's head detach from his body, and we just start to see like this guy's chest is starting to spew out blood, and we'll see that his head is to of course be way a ways from his body, to where Wendy is just kind of walking over it and making her way back to Kevin to see if he's okay. That goes on, and in technicality kind of ends the film, but there is another scene that happens after that. So we would go on to see Duran is meeting up with that doorman, and it seems that this is to be a location of this doorman's home, possibly. So Duran is having this disagreement with this doorman and saying, like, yeah, I'm definitely going to kill you now, as of course this doorman is to be tied up with a number of goons that are to be around him. So while they're going on and they're talking here, Duran will notice that this doorman has this viper on him. And so he's like, oh, so you're going to go on and try to consume this bit of alcohol? Oh, well, I'm going to go on and I'm going to take this from you and I'm going to drink it. So Duran drinks the viper and he starts to melt away. And the doorman is assuming that he's going to take Duran's place as kind of this lead gangster guy. And that's how the movie just kind of ends and wraps up. So yeah, with that said, I'm gonna get the heck out of here. I don't know if there's any other scenes that happened besides that because I didn't go that far into the credits. I just saw the credits were starting to roll, so I was like, okay, I think that's the end of the film. So I'm gonna get that out of here so I can get this uploaded for today. That I can also go on and do other things for my day. So thank you for watching this. I do appreciate it. Hopefully you'll go on and enjoy this review if you want to check it out. But without a doubt, I'm gonna go on and get that out of here so I can just enjoy the rest of my day. Thank you for enjoying this review, or just also you have a enjoyable day as well. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.